Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today for what I think you are going to think is a very interesting presentation on 800-171 CMMC, a different angle. We're going to take it by the numbers today. My partner, Mitch Tannenbaum, is part of this. Mitch, please say hi to everyone.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. So bridging the gap. We're trying to find the hidden costs. We're going to look at the numbers behind the new rule for 800-171 compliance that just came out December 23rd. We have analyzed it real hard, and we've come up with some ideas and some thoughts. We want to work collaboratively with the DoD and all the DIB to increase security and do it right. So this, like I said, is a numbers-based analysis, and that will be our presentation today. So who are we and why do we matter in this conversation? Well, we've been doing it a long time. This is what we do. We work with the DIB to help them comply. We own and operate multiple risk management entities. We've got 60 years of active direct operational experience. We've been RP for the Cyber AB since 2017. Certified veteran-owned GSA mass contract holder. More information and our capability statement at HuttonHoldingLLC.com. Right there. That link right there. HuttonHoldingLLC.com. More about us later. Here we go. Disclaimer. Okay, we've got a lot of things we're saying in here. Don't use it for anything legal or really important. Go do your own research. We assume no responsibility for your mistakes. We make enough of our own. Thank you very much. Purpose. Okay, first of all, help companies understand the true costs of CMMC compliance. I think the DoD did a good job trying to run at what they did and analyze it, but we just don't think it's complete. And being on the front lines, being the infantry, we need it to be complete. Help businesses decide if they want to keep DoD federal contractor businesses as clients. That's an issue. Help businesses decide whether they want to be a contractor or subcontractor. Help businesses decide if they want to be an external service provider. And final, and certainly not least, help businesses seize the impending opportunity, which we think and we will demonstrate with numbers is absolutely immense, much larger than what the DoD is telling us. Anything to add to that, Mitch?
Yeah, let me add something about items 2 and 4. So you may think that you're not a direct DoD contractor or service provider, and that may well be true. But the way the regulations are written, if you are selling to or providing services to a DoD contractor who is required to comply with this new rule, then you will also be required to comply with the rule. So that's where you have to decide whether you want to be in that business or not, or whether you want to fire your customer or get fired by your customer.
Thanks, Mitch. Okay, so who's this apply to? Okay, if you start right here, companies handling federal contract information, FCI, but not CUI, okay? So that's the level 1, foundational. It applies to companies handling control unclassified information with low to moderate impact levels and companies handling CUI with high impact levels, level 1, level 2. So if you fall into any of these categories right there, this applies to you and you need this information that we're going to give you today.
Fundamentally, everybody who has a federal contract or is subbing to or providing services to somebody who has a federal contract, you have the requirement to comply with level 1.
By the way, as we do this presentation, you'll see on many slides, we're trying to summarize what's on the slide, but there is written information, written text in there. Come back on your own time and read and drill down, like, required compliance actions and whatnot. Feel free to come on back and get that information. So let's look at our table of contents today. So we've got the problem we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about it and what's being done about it. What are the DoD cost estimates? What are they? Are they realistic or not? We're going to get into that. And if not, where are they not? And then we're going to get into some supportive suggestions we have about making it more accurate. Repercussions. If there's no course change, what could happen? What's the downside? Then let's look at your compliance costs, okay? Not what DoD is saying, but we think yours are and how to get there. The prize is yours. We think there's a huge prize there, okay? And then how we can help you get there for less money and brain damage. That's what we're going to cover today. The problem. Now, DoD has been working on this for a long time. All right. And we've been involved with it since the beginning of this process, but there's a lot of clues the DOD is really serious this time. Now, if you want a full history of this issue from the beginning, that's not like multiple pages long, but a couple pages long, go to our website here, Cybersecurity website, and go to that page and you'll see a great history. It's totally up to date. So if you're not up to date on this, go there, you'll be up to date. Okay. Now, if the DOD is, we think they are. Okay, what does that mean? Well, big change coming. Okay, it's because the government, we're having just huge intellectual property losses right now, and the government is being forced to do something about it via its laws and rules. Now, the DOD, they're going to lead the charge because they're already their compliance process is already ahead of the rest of the federal government and the rest of our society, by the way. And so, and they've got a lot of muscle, so they're going to be the tip of the spear. They've got a lot of federal contractors working for DOD, and most of them, as we're going to see, are already in violation of the law. So, but there's going to be big change. Big change. And if you're involved in this ecosystem of working on contracts for the defense, for DOD or the federal government, you're going to be impacted. Can DOD actually do this? I mean, is it really impossible? Because they're saying up front that they have limited resources to protect CUI. Because why? Because they're already having a lot of troubles protecting really classified information, super classified information. They've transferred responsibility for DIB assessments to the private industry assessors, C3PAOs, who've been certified by a nonprofit organization called the CyberAB. They used to be called the CMMC accreditation body, but they've changed their name now, and that's the organization we've been a member of since 2017. These C3PAO assessors perform the assessments, and they transfer the results to DOD for final certification. Contracting officers, KOs is right there, contracting officers, look at this, are required to verify a contractor certification status prior to, that should be, well, it's awarding or rewarding the contract. Awarding, I believe, should be proper wording. This is where the rubber meets the road. Will the KOs really do this? Mitch, you have anything to say about that?
Yes, I do. KOs are very risk averse. So if the regulation says, the DFAR says, you must do this, they will do that, because what they don't want is the contract to be disputed later because they didn't follow the regulation. So once that regulation is out and it's final, which is going to be late this year, early next year, they will start following that because they don't want to be called on the carpet later.
Thanks, Mitch. Okay, so but some data that we didn't create or anything, data according to the electronic data access system for these years, tell us this about DoD awards. An average of 1.3 million contracts per year that contain this particular clause, this compliance clause here. They were awarded to 31,000 unique awardees, of which 6,800,000, 50% are made to 23,000 small entities. I mean, this is big numbers is what we're trying to show you. This is a big, and we're going to give you more numbers showing you the impact on our economy and how this flows down into the economy and how important all this is.
Let me talk for a minute about that first bullet. So recently, in the last couple of months, the Inspector General of the Department of Defense called out the components, the Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, for not marking CUI adequately. And when the IG goes off and embarrasses the generals running these commands, the first thing they do is overreact. So expect that the next year, the next couple of years, we're going to see more contracts that have the 7012 clause, not less.
Thanks, Mitch. And for everyone watching this today, normally when we do our presentations, we're always in very time-constrained deal. We're trying to get it done in, depending what it is, 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, whatever. Today, this content is so important. This subject is so important. This is probably going to be an hour-long presentation. We're not putting any limits on ourselves. We're going to talk about it in depth. This is the best hour you're going to spend learning about what's going on here with DoD, what's really going on here, and how to position yourself or not within this ecosystem. Okay, here their strategy to force this change. They want to force it. They're going to leverage off the U.S. government and DOD's market size. You're going to learn more about that in a minute. Leverage off the national security issue. Fair enough. Somebody's got to do it. Leverage off the enforcement powers of the federal government, Department of Justice. Now, their strategy includes the U.S. federal government, led by the executive branch, and DOD, supported by DOJ, are now starting to enforce contract compliance. They're first going to focus on the prime contractors. Then they're going to make the prime contractors responsible for subs compliance through civil and criminal and enforcement. Control new contracts and contractors more tightly, and fund additional DOJ enforcement capabilities. Mitchell.
Yep. So a couple of things there. In terms of the bullet that talked about enforcement through civil and criminal processes, there's a thing called the False Claims Act. It's been around since the Civil War. The Department of Justice just spun up last year a whole new division that's just responsible for False Claims Act enforcement. They have already completed a number of enforcement actions, one to a large defense contractor whose name you would recognize. They fined them $70 million. The thing that's kind of cool about the False Claims Act, if you're on the wrong side of it, I suppose, or very concerning if you're on the other side, is that the way the law is written, whistleblowers, the people who tell the government about it, are eligible for up to 30% of whatever the government collects. So there's a large incentive for people, disgruntled ex-employees, competitors who didn't get the gig, whatever it is. There's a large incentive for people to blow the whistle and get rich.
Thank you. Good points. Conclusion that they can do it. They've got the muscle, okay? And they know the defense industrial base is in violation of its contracts. They think that they've got enough to make this thing happen, okay? Because we started this thing, are they serious this time kind of a thing? Because they've been threatened a long time. Yeah. Okay, so now let's get into the numbers. Let's start looking. Now, this is our second section of the presentation. And for if you want to get into the numbers yourself, with this report, this rule that was released by Department of Defense is 234 pages long. Here's the title. Go Google it. This right here, the cost analysis, and it's this data that we're getting ready to present you is coming from them, not us. We'll show you. We'll tell you when our data is different. But this is what you can go look up and find this report yourself. We've spent a lot of time analyzing this thing, crunching these numbers, and we're doing it not only for this presentation. We have our own rationale for doing it because we are building a particular application, which we'll talk about later, a 800-171 GRC application that we want to market into the defense industrial base. So we had to understand the numbers, what really is the size of our market. We were coming at it from that angle as well, but that made us experts to talk to you about this. So starting at the very top, total annual public and government costs to assess the DIB. Just assess it, okay, not protect it. Their total was for the public, which means DIB contractors, okay, $4.2 billion is what they're saying. And they said for the government, their costs, $9 million. Well, okay, that's their numbers. Okay, we're going to tell you we might have a problem with these numbers later, but that's what the totals were in that report that you will read if you go read it. Now, this report, this cost analysis that the Department of Defense did, it covers small business entities, their assessment costs, and other than small business entities, their assessment costs. They address certain cost centers, risk assessments, which, by the way, assumes a traditional non-automated approach to assessment and certification, different from our new GRC solution, which assumes an automated approach, reporting of the assessment and affirmations. That's officers saying, yeah, this is all true. This is true. We're putting our name on it. POAM mitigation, plan of action with milestone mitigation. External service providers, people, consultants like us, your managed service providers, they're external service providers. What are those costs? Okay. Non-recurring engineering, NRE, and recurring. This is what are the costs you had to spend up front to get everything ready, to get in compliance, and then what is the cost of all the technical stuff and stuff you had to do afterwards to maintain it? Anything you want to add in here, Mitch?
I think we're going to handle it in the next slide, but the point here that's important is this is just assessment costs. This is not doing the things you need to do in order to be able to get ready to start planning an assessment.
That's correct. That's correct. Heads up. Heads up. Numbers in the DoD analysis only pertain to the existing DoD contractor base of 221,000 prime and subcontractors. Now, there's some dispute as to whether this number is just primes and some subcontractors, includes all of them, but that's the number they come up with and say, this is the number that we're talking about. That's what they say. It says, and it only addresses existing contractors who are already supposedly in full compliance with their contractual obligations. It does not include various external service providers and other costs that a new contractor will have. So this is a limited cost analysis that they released to all of us to cope with out here. Nor does it include ongoing recurring costs that existing contractors have because DoD says those costs should have been factored into contract since 2017. Remember, and we're going to bring more details on this minute, this total cost analysis, we believe, has got problems because of this issue right here and some other stuff we're going to point out in a minute. Now, let's get back to the exact. You might not read that 234 pages, okay? Most people are not going to do that. But let's get their language, what they're saying right here. Here's the quote, okay? In estimating the public costs, DoD considered applicable, non-recurring engineering, recurring engineering, assessment costs, and affirmation costs of each. That's all they're saying. That's it. That's what they have done. For CMMC levels 1, 2, and 3, the cost estimate is based only upon assessment, certification, affirmation activities that a defense contractor, subcontract, or ecosystem member must take to allow the DoD to verify implementation of the relevant underlying security requirements. That's it. And that's essentially what's it going to cost everybody to go out and assess the DIB, okay, to make sure that we can certify them or not. Just assess them, okay? All right. But that's not the cost you have to deal with, my friend. Not if you're in this business. Obviously, they're saying this thing again. One more time. We're making this point usually, all right? It doesn't include implementing requirements, okay? Implementation is already required, they say, okay? So, and the cost should already have been occurred and factored into contract prices. If everyone is doing this right, when you submitted your contract price to the government, it should have already covered all these costs, okay? And it says right here, and what we're saying is, well, that's not reality, my friends. That's not reality.
So if we look at, for example, level 2, just as an example, there's 110 controls. And if you have multiple environments, for example, if you have a Windows environment and a Linux environment, multiply that by 2, they're assuming, and I understand why they're assuming that, since this regulation went into effect, the 7012 regulation went into effect in December of 2017, the contracts that you bid on and submitted pricing to the government in 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, they should have already included those costs because you were attesting by submitting the bid that you were going to be fully compliant with the requirements of the DFARS and FARs that are in the particular solicitation.
Thanks, Mitch. Okay, so here's some numbers. The DoD estimate of the number of initial estimates required for existing DIB contractors. And you'll see here, it got broken into small business, other than small, total, and what the percentage is. And these are initial, and you'll see this is the 221,286 number again here, broken out, what the numbers are. So, and where you might fit in this process over here.
By the way, the definition of small business for them is based on the SBA definition, which ranges somewhere between 500 and 750 employees, depending on the industry you're in. So that's why the numbers for small businesses are so large. There's very few massive contractors with, 100,000 employees. So the vast majority of contractors are going to be small businesses.
Right. Now, here's the DOD of initial assessments for DOD. Here's how many assessments are going to have to be performed over 7 years. And so it tells you this is their estimate of how these initial assessments are going to be done as they are getting the entire DIB assessed. And so that number may be of interest to you or not. For us, it was of interest for our own financial calculations. So we got into that pretty deep.
Now, we know that there's some small percentage of folks who are going to be able to do a level 2 self-assessment. You can see that's, 4,000 out of, basically a total requirement of 80,000 for level 2. But remember, if you have 2 contracts and one of them allows you to do a self-assessment, but the other one doesn't, then don't bother with the self-assessment because you're going to need to do the certification in order to comply with that other contract.
Thank you. Okay, but that's not all. Remember, level 1 assessments must be repeated annually every year. Okay, that was not included in the DOD numbers. Level 2 and level 3 assessments must be repeated triennially, but executive management must attest and affirm annually to meet compliance. So this increases total assessment and ESP support requirements. That reality changes this reality right here.
And that annual assessment, the government is going to have a portal very similar to what they do for Sarbanes-Oxley, where you're going to have to go submit a document and attest on their portal that you're compliant. So there's not going to be any wiggle room that you're going to say, "Oh, I didn't do that."
That's part of your overall affirmations. Okay, so the DOD costs, again, remember, they were $4.2 billion and $9 million. Okay, so let's look at DOD assessment costs for small entities per assessment, DOD costs for other than small. So this is what they're saying that your costs will be if you're a small entity or other than small per assessment, according to their calculations. So small entities, L1, L2, L2, L3. Notice that down here at the bottom, you've got broken out. Frequency, we just told you about that. Plan and prepare, conduct the assessment, report the results, affirmations, subtotal, POAM costs, plan of action milestone. You look through this year, they're saying about $6,000 annually for level 1, $37,000 triannually for level 2. Level 2 triennial, $104 every 3 years. And then over here, L3 certification, about $13.
So let's talk about these numbers here. So remember that, and we keep talking about POAMs, and there's been some wiggle room historically where people have said they're compliant even though they have a POAM that's as long as their arm. Right now, there's only literally a few of the items that you can be granted a POAM for that will still allow you to say you're certified or certifiable, you meet the requirements. And no POAM items can exist for more than 180 days. If you are certified, you'll get what's called a provisional certification if you have POAM items, and that certification will vaporize in 181 days if you haven't met all the requirements that are in the POAM. For the self-assessments, level 1, level 2, there are no POAMs, not allowed. Either you meet all the requirements or you don't meet all the requirements. And then for level 3, that assumes that you've already completed the level 2 certification, not the level 2 self-assessment, but the level 2 certification. So that small number there is an additional cost to meet some additional requirements that are required for level 3.
Okay, so those are the DOD costs for small entities per assessment. So let's go look at other than small per assessment. You can see same structure in the cost analysis, $4,000, which is actually a little bit less than what the last one was there. If you notice, that was $6,000. And so, but that's their calculations, how they figured it out, $4,817. and 44. These numbers jump up over here. This is all related again, and these numbers over here, this is how much time does it take various folks within the organization to do the things they need to do to get this assessment done.
And for a lot of folks, they're going to be relying on external providers to help them do these calculations. So this is both internal costs and the cost of third parties that you engage to help you figure out the answers to the questions.
And the DoD does allow for those external costs in their calculations. Small annual, here we go, assessment breaking down level 1. Just to give you an idea, we're not breaking down all the levels for you, but we're giving you an idea. For this one right here, we've got here, now they've allowed no NRE and RE, okay? They've assumed you've already done that, right? Planning and prep for the assessment, they provide hours here. How many hours? Internal staff hours, external staff hours, ESP is external, right? This is the hours. Now they have different hourly compensation rates broken down for the different staff levels that they are thinking are required. We're not presenting all that information, but you can find it in the report. It's there, or we're giving you a summary of what they just said. So these are their numbers. So these are the times and the money coming up to the 5977.
Let's talk for a second about external service providers and what that means. That's a new term that they just kind of coined in this most recent notice of proposed rulemaking. An external service provider is anybody who's not one of your company's employees that potentially has access to either controlled unclassified information or federal contract information, or security protection assets. So what's a security protection asset? That's your antivirus software, anti-malware software. It's your endpoint management software. It's your firewall, managing your firewall. So if you have a vendor who helps you manage your firewall and they have access to your firewalls, that's a security protection asset. If you have a contractor who comes in and helps you manage your databases, or obviously if you have a managed service provider who's helping you run your systems, that's an example of an external service provider, or a managed security service provider, an MSSP, another example. But basically anybody who's not one of your employees, different company, who potentially touches controlled unclassified information or security protection assets.
Great. Thanks, Mitch. We'll touch on that a little bit later as well. But now we're looking at L2, self-assessment costs, and how they break out the time. This year, 36 hours for planning and prep. 16 and 48, was that 64 hours for the self-assessment itself, and reporting 12 hours, a little over 12 hours. And that 0.08 is correct on there, by the way. And then the last part, the affirmations on here. So, but and the DoD spent some time on this. They talked to a lot of people. They got input from a lot of people. So their numbers, they're feeling pretty confident about their self-assessment costs that they're presenting to us. And I'm going, okay, we're not disputing these particular numbers for what they are saying it is.
And part of the regulatory process required them to get sort of a confirmation with the Small Business Administration. So part of the GSA process, we're releasing a rule. You have to run the rule by the Small Business Administration and make sure any concerns that they have are somehow addressed. So this is not a number that they made up in a vacuum, nor is it a number where they went to $1 billion defense contractor and said, well, tell us what the numbers are. They went to the SBA and said, you guys help us, validate that these numbers are reasonable.
And if you look into the hourly rates that they ascribe to the various positions doing the various work, the hourly rates come from the various contractors' hourly rates that are being charged to DoD right now. And so, their numbers, they went to some trouble to do this stuff. So, give them their due on this. This is hard to do with 221,000 contractors. Now, here's some more in here. This is for other than small entity, and you can see the number of hours that they're ascribing to these various issues for larger businesses to accomplish these various steps over here. And this is based on a 3-year schedule at this point, because you have to do it every 3 years over here. So, worth noting, This is an interesting point that Mitch brought up in here. Mitch, would you go ahead and just read this and present this, please?
So, yeah, one of the things that's happening, right, is that a limited base of CMMC assessors. So first of all, the law or regulation requirements are that in order for you to become CMMC compliant, either assessed and attested to or certified, the ESPs that you have, these external service providers I talked about a minute ago, they already must have achieved compliance. Now, the rules are for an external service provider for level 2 in particular, or level 3, is they cannot do a self-assessment. That's not an option for them. They also cannot have a POAM. So the bar is actually a little higher for ESPs than it is for you, because you potentially could do a self-assessment maybe if you're one of the lucky few, and you certainly could have a POAM at least for 6 months. ESPs can't have either one of those. So that's a real challenge. If you use 2, 3, 4 external service providers, then you need to make sure that you are comfortable that those guys have achieved compliance, whatever that means for them, before you submit. Now, the C3PAO, the certifiers, they're not going to go off and put you in the queue for certification until they think you stand a decent chance of passing. So they're going to ask you for your pre-assessment documentation. They're going to ask you for all of your artifacts. They're going to ask you about your network diagram. They're going to ask you what's in scope and what's not in scope. Whole other conversation. They're going to ask you all these questions, and if you don't sort of pass this pre-test, they're not even going to schedule you.
Exactly. That's a very good point. And this goes to the basis for what Mitch and I are trying to do right now. We know these you see the costs related to the assessments, they're high. And we haven't even gotten into fixing anything yet. And so, but we're going, you really have to do pre-assessments before you do the real assessment. And these assessments are expensive. That's why they have to be automated, but they've got to be good. It can't be some junky assessment that really doesn't get down to what the truth is. So how do you accomplish that in the context of a GRC tool that is focused strictly on 800-171 CMMC compliance? That's the product we're building currently, but we're trying to address this because the cost for assessments must go much further down. They must drop radically in order to comply with DoD's needs.
So a couple of thoughts about that. First of all, the only company or person who can do an assessment is a Cyber AB and therefore DoD certified assessor. So you can't get your brother-in-law or sister-in-law to go off and do an assessment for you. That doesn't qualify. The DoD is going to review the first couple of years each and every one of these results that a C3PAO does to make sure that they're not hedging their bets. And as a result of that, the C3PAOs are going to go off and make sure that every I is dotted, every T is crossed, because they don't want to lose their certification.
Exactly. And with Mitch and I, our company, we help people prepare for assessments, the final certification assessments. We can do pre-certification assessments, which is what we're doing and trying to do, but we can't assess you. We can't be on that side of the fence. You can't have the fox guarding the chicken house over here. And so we're on this side over here, and we understand these costs and these pressures, and that's what we're trying to help solve. Accurate costs. Okay, now let's get down to it. What do we think about these costs? Okay, you've already got a clue. You've already had a clue, but we want to give you some more to think about on this. Okay, and again, we are friends and family on this thing. All right, we're not looking to, and we're going to say right here, here's our no blame statement. All right, basically saying, look, we're on the DoD side. We're on the country side. We're patriots. We're trying to protect the IT infrastructure of the country. We understand it. We're not pointing fingers. We don't think anybody should be charged with anything or what. No, whatever. Let's move on. Let's just fix the stuff. So check this statement out if you want to know how we feel about this. Our estimate of the number of DoD and federal contractors requiring initial assessments over the next 7 years. 7 years, that's the time frame DoD used, okay? What's the source? Us. And by the way, Summit 7, which is another big a consulting firm doing DoD work. This is where some of this information comes from here, but this is our estimate. Here is what the DoD, here's the existing base, the 221. You've seen that number already. But now what's this? Additional DoD and federal companies. See below. Okay, so we're going to talk about this. Another 208,000 companies. So now you've got a subtotal here of 429. External service providers. See below. Where's this come from? You'll see, well, all we did with this was we figured, okay, this wasn't all the contractors. Now we're talking about DoD and federal contractors. And we're going to get into this a little bit more here. Not just the DO, but this thing is being rolled out to all federal contractors. And so you've got 221, you've got 208, which we'll show you where we get, 429. External, we say, okay, 2 external service providers for each one of these. 2. Okay? Well, it's that, we can make a case. It could be a lot more than that. Okay? MSP and a cybersecurity consultant, no technical tools providers. So we say there's 800,000 other numbers. A total of 1 million, 1.2 million is what we're saying. This is the number of businesses. If our assumptions are correct, this is the number that's going to have initial assessments over the next 7 years. It's a very, very different view of the world than what DoD is looking at right now. But we think in order to really protect the DIB and the federal government, because the federal government, remember, NSA and GSA already is starting to follow the CMMC stuff already. And then beyond that, by the way, don't forget our Five Eye allies out there, the Five Eyes. They are also lining up behind DoD, trying to protect their own DIBs. I mean, this is a big impact on the world here, and you can be part of it or you can exit it, depending on your viewpoint here. But that's the beginning of our number of what needs to be done out here to protect the DIB. Just the assessments, not all the rest of the work, is this number, which is 1 million more than what the DoD is saying. Mitch, anything to add to that?
Yes. So you touched on tools, and I think that's an important thing we really haven't talked about that much. So, for example, if you have an antivirus product, and the antivirus product has a cloud portal, that means that tool has to be compliant with the regulations. And in case, depending on the specifics of the tool, it's either they need to be CMMC certified or they need to be FedRAMP certified. But think about the number of security tools that you have, whether it's a firewall management tool or a wireless router tool or anything else, anything that's cloud-based, that's in scope. All of those factor into 158,000 number.
Thank you, Mitch. Mitch, would you also address that note at the bottom there about that? I can't see the entire note based on this presentation process here. Address
yeah, sure. So the issue here is DoD has visibility to the names of companies that are listed on a contract. So if, I'll just pick somebody at random, Lockheed Martin, is partnering with, 3 other companies to go deliver some weapons system, which is very typical, right? Those partners might be listed on the contract. But what's not listed on the contract is the 10 machine shops that they're using around the country that are machining parts for them, or the plating contractors, or the folks that are doing metal fatigue testing, or the folks that are doing quality assurance. None of those companies the DoD has any visibility to because they're not listed on the contract. So the numbers that they're coming up with, and they admit this, there's no secret here, that they have visibility to are the folks that are listed on the contract. And so that's why there's a lot more. Now, the DoD has publicly said that they think that this supply chain, which is what they call that, goes down 14 levels from the prime contract down to the very lowest sub. If Joe runs a machine shop and he uses a cloud service provider, well, that's another level. if that cloud service provider for, some software tool that they use, like ERP. And if that ERP tool is hosted in another cloud provider. So you think about this, all the tools that all these companies use and all these subcontractors, a big company like the one I mentioned a minute ago, they have thousands of subcontractors that they know about, but they don't disclose those to the government. For one thing, they consider that proprietary. And it goes down to small organizations that, are 5 people that are doing polishing of glass for weapon systems. I mean, there's an amazing number of subs that have very specific capabilities that the primes don't have and that they have outsourced to third parties.
So a viewer out there might be saying, what are you guys smoking over there? You've jumped from that 221,000 number up to 1.2 million. And what we're trying to point out here is that, the numbers actually could be much greater. I mean, there are 30 million businesses in the U.S. So it's a lot of businesses, and the defense industrial base is 12%, 12 to 15% of the federal government. And so we have got the enormity of the federal government and its impact on our economy and whatnot is just huge, huge. And so what is the truth on that? The impact is larger, much larger, and the challenge is larger than what the DoD is saying. That's bottom line, what we're talking about here. And so we've said it before, the DoD is assuming that everyone's already compliant, okay? And it's not digging into all the other costs associated with becoming compliant other than the assessments. Now, another fact here that's important. If 100%, now everybody who is in the defense industrial base, the 221 number, 221K, they have to report, they're supposed to report their compliance score into a system. SPRS is that system. I forget what it stands for, reporting scores, security process, reporting score, something. You remember what it stands for, Mitch?
Supplier Performance Risk System.
Yes, Supplier Performance Risk System score. Thanks. And they have to report the score in. But if 100% of them put their score in there, and all those scores were 110, which is the maximum score, then the DoD assumptions would be more correct. However, ExoStar a year ago estimated that only 30% of the DIB had submitted their SPRS score. So, and the DoD does not release SPRS statistics. So we don't know how many companies are submitting a score or saying that they are compliant, or whether they're compliant or not, just what's their score. Our clients are submitting scores, but those scores do not say that they've achieved a score of 110. They're in some lower state working their way up, and DoD's not squawking about that. They know that. But the reality of it, this is an admission that DoD fully knows that this base out there is not compliant and hasn't done all the stuff it needs. Okay, that's great. That's great. But that is the reality. That is the reality of the situation. Therefore, it is our opinion and estimate that 95% or more of the DIB is not compliant. And the DIB investment required to achieve compliance and then prepare for DoD CMMC certification has not been made. Not correctly calculated or estimated. Not close. Okay? That's our contention based on everything that we're seeing. Plus, doing it. We're doing it out here every day.
But obviously nobody knows whether that 95% is the right number. But even if we assumed, and we don't think this is correct, that 50% are compliant, that means 50% are not compliant, then the cost for that other 50% to become compliant, that's not factored into this.
It's not factored in anywhere. And some more evidence here on this. Okay, so now we've got a bunch of bullets here, but we need to cover them because there's some good stuff in here that relates to this conversation. Well, how compliant is the entire DIB, really? Okay, are we just down to having to do an assessment? Hoo-hoo. It's widely accepted by folks like us that compliance has never been achieved, not even close. The people doing the business, we all know. Our experience is that their SPUR scores typically range from minus 35 to 70. These low scores are true no matter the size or sophistication. Bigger companies, smaller companies, they're all a mess. Based on our look at them, top management compliance support across the nation is universally weak, shockingly weak as far as we're concerned. Now, true compliance with any compliance regime is very difficult and expensive. We know that. Doesn't matter what kind of compliance regime it is, actually. This is why that 99% of all businesses globally are not properly protecting their IT infrastructures. That's why every day on the newspaper and the news and news feeds and everything, breach. Why? No one's protecting their organizations properly. There's no, and boards aren't making management protect. Management's not making IT. No one's doing their jobs on this. Now, we've been able to help a couple of our smaller clients with relatively simple IT infrastructures achieve scores of 90 to 100. So it is possible for smaller clients who work at it to get it done, but we haven't got any larger size who've gotten up to that score yet. Although we do have people working on it. They're working on it. Everyone's working on it, in part of our clients anyway, but it's the amount of financial and human resources they have to devote to it is very low, and progress is slow. And here's one. Mitch, would you explain the last one?
Sure. The DIB, which is the part of the government that is currently under the current regulation allowed to do assessments, they do have access to SPURs, and so they are looking at the scores, and they have released graphs that show the average score in aggregate over time. And they're showing that the numbers are going down somewhat. And they think that's actually a good thing. They hope that's a short-term issue. But what they're saying is, as people become more knowledgeable, like people who are watching this webinar, become more knowledgeable about the requirements for actually getting CMMC certified, they're going back and reviewing 80171 compliance numbers, and they are lowering their score to account for that. So that's why we're seeing the scores go down.
Remember, DOD, we believe, does know the nature of this problem. They might not be facing it squarely, but they do believe with the size of the federal government in our economy and the fact that the federal government is the largest customer anywhere on earth, and with DOD's tip of the spear position within this effort and the things that they know, they're thinking we can force this change out. And okay, we hope that they can for all of our benefit, because I don't think any of us like to see our airplanes flying around in the Chinese Air Force over there because they've stolen our intellectual property. I don't think we enjoy that. Additional questions that we have regarding this cost analysis. Okay, so we've already talked about how they think all this is already factored in to the current costs are already factored into the costs and whatnot. Are DIB recurring engineering and cost estimates, are they realistic? Since everything is off and skewed, what are they thinking those initial non-recurring engineering costs and recurring engineering costs, what do they think those are? Is their thinking realistic on this? Or is that skewed in one way or another? How about are ongoing implementation and upgrade costs correctly estimated? Again, those costs are not being addressed by this analysis. Are the DoD labor rates accurate? Now, we like the fact that they took it from their contracts. That's good. But when we were looking at some of the labor rates, we were going, is that really a good labor rate for that? Does that make sense? Could be right, could work out, but we question it, okay? Are their assessment task time estimates accurate? The length of time to get these assessments done, etc. Is that correct? Maybe for some people, some of the time, I don't know. And then how many DIB contractors are able to correctly project and budget for compliance costs when current DoD estimates are still questionable? I'd say the ceiling. Who could do that? This is tough stuff. You need a lot of help is needed to be done in order to make this thing happen. So, that's not all. That's not all. Additional cost issues. The DIB needs the DoD support in calculating the following compliance costs. Costs associated with completing the POAMs, ESP costs, costs associated with the required third-party technical tools, costs associated with replacing existing technical tools with compliant technical tools. Mitch, this is a hot zone for you. Would you please expound on this?
Yeah, so let's give the DoD a little credit here, right? They're saying that, their assumption in terms of what they're doing, putting these numbers together, is that you've been doing this all along. So if you have third-party tools, if you know that periodically you need to upgrade third-party tools, if you have external service providers, all those things, they're assuming that you've been doing that all along, which is why those numbers aren't there. Now, on the other hand, what Ray is saying is, given that you haven't been doing that, do you just need to face the reality? Does DoD need to face reality and say, yeah, these costs are costs associated with actually completing the assessment, but the average company is going to need to spend significantly more money in order to get compliant because they haven't been, even though they've been contractually required to be compliant since 2017. So with regard to replacing existing tools, go back to the tool that I've been beating up for the last, 45 minutes in this presentation. Let's assume you have an antivirus product, and let's assume the antivirus product has a cloud component. They all do. So I don't care which one you're using, they all do. And that cloud product is not CMMC or FedRAMP certified. In order for you to pass your certification or self-assessment, you're going to have to replace that tool with one that is compliant. And I can tell you, because I've been working with a very large company whose name starts with a G and ends with an E, Google, and getting an answer out of them in terms of their compliance has been like, pulling teeth. It's real interesting. So you can imagine the difficulty you're going to have with all the different tools that you use, actually getting an answer from them in writing, right? Because this has to be part of your artifacts that you're going to be able to say, gee, I have verified that this company is compliant. One would be, say, your firewall vendor, or if you have a virtual private network, a VPN. Do they use FIPS certified encryption? And if they do, show me a copy of their FIPS certificate, which is, assuming that they have completed it, that's publicly available. But you need to collect all that, and you're going to find large tools. Oh yeah, by the way, this firewall product, yeah, we do have a FIPS version, but it's not the product that you bought. And you can replace it with a different product, which, oh yeah, costs more money because getting FIPS certified, costs a decent sized vendor $1 million a year, and we're going to go recover those costs. So you got to rip out those tools and replace them with other tools. And that's not factored into these numbers either, because they've been assuming that you've been doing this, because that's the regulation, since 2017.
So if you're sitting there and you're getting ready to swallow a handful of antidepressants, hang on. I know we're painting a dark picture right now. I understand it. We've analyzed these numbers. We're going to bring you hope. There's more to it. Bear with us so we can get you all the way through this, so that at least at the end of this, you can make intelligent decisions about what you want to do, because you've been thoroughly indoctrinated in the situation. Okay, next, costs associated with getting all required external service providers compliant with CMMC before the contractor can use them. Hello, MSPs, managed service providers. Costs associated with enclave building. Enclave? What's an enclave? Well, we can talk about that, but an enclave is kind of you have to run two parallel IT infrastructures, right? One to handle the government information over here and one for everything else. That's an enclave. If you're going to do that as part of your compliance, because you got big enough contracts, you want to keep them, what's the cost associated with that? Okay? Costs association with international suppliers. People have international suppliers. How do you control that bunch? It costs money to do it. But so at this point, these are all threats, to the way we're looking at things and how we're doing things. And we have to recognize them if we're going to fix the problem. How do we get the DIB compliant ASAP? And more importantly, how to protect the country's assets? How to enforce this compliance moving forward? How to retain, here we go, how to retain experienced DIB contractors while enforcing compliance. Okay? This is hard to do. Are those DIB contractors, that 221 number, are they going to start heading for the doors because they just can't do it? How to attract new DIB contractors? Okay? How to attract qualified ESPs to support the DIB and stop existing ESPs from exiting the market. These are difficult challenges that we have to face and deal with. Hold everything. Unbridled commercial break. We've been talking about, we'll make this short, don't worry. Do you think your current managed service provider is truly qualified to provide you with the cybersecurity and privacy support you need to comply with CMMC? You might want to go check your contract on that, your contract with your MSP. We read MSP's contracts for people because companies don't manage their managed service providers. They don't have good contracts. The contracts are loaded towards the managed service provider. They might want to do a good job for you, and they try to do it, but you have no control over them. You don't understand what they're doing. We help people do that, and a lot of smaller companies must have an MSP to do this work because they don't have an IT department themselves. This is part of what Mitch.
And oh yes, remember your managed service provider, they have their own external service providers for the tools that they use. So not only does the managed service provider need to be qualified, but all of the tools that they use need to be certified. And I actually, just this week, was talking to one of the very large tool companies that MSPs use and really pushing them hard and them getting certified. They understand what they need to do, and they actually have a program in place for 2024 for getting that underway because they know that's going to be a requirement.
Hutchins Holding, HuttonsHoldingLLC.com. Go there, check it out, call us. Okay, now, how about some good news? What can we do? How can we come together? Okay? How we do a little heart thing there? That's it. Little heart thing. Together, because we are all Americans. We want to support our country. We want to protect our national assets. We want to stop the bleeding. We're there. Let's do it. Let's get on with it. Okay? First and foremost, how can the DOD help? The DOD can do a lot more, folks, in our opinion, and should, and frankly, will, because they can't do anything else. Issue a blanket compliance reprieve or extension to the DIB subcontractors, at least the smaller ones. This could be in the form of a one-time warning with a defined time to fix, whatever. Right now, everyone's in violation. Right now, everyone is technically committing fraud. Why? Yes, it's a lever, perhaps, for some muscle, but it's the wrong frame of mind in a national security event when we all have to come together and do the things we have to do. Forgive and forget. We've all part of it. Forget. Who cares? Let's move forward. Let's open it. That's our suggestion. That's our request to DOD to consider. ASA number 2. Make public SPURS statistics so we all know. Let's go ahead and tell ourselves the truth. We want to know what's going on. Let's get it on. Reanalyze and publish DIB initial and ongoing compliance costs ASAP. Okay, they did a good job, a good first run at this. Great. But with all, if what we're saying makes sense, if there's good points in there, accept them. And I'm sure other people are making these points as well. Let's go in and redo the numbers. Okay. This should include both public and government costs, because we don't think that $9 million for the government sounds right. I don't know. $4 billion for private, $9 million, $4 billion number we don't think's right. Number one, $9 million, don't think so. Treat this task as the national security priority that it is. Makes sense. Okay. Reset the DIB compliance goals, including compliance incentives and appropriate and correctly funded enforcement processes and mechanisms. Incentives. Why not? Actively support the development and implementation of approved DIB governance tools, enclave architectures, technical tool processes and procedures. The government, we already distribute to our clients technical tools screened and approved by the NSA. The NSA has gone out and, looked at technical tools, said, hey, we've already made the contract. We've already screened them. Here, give them out. We give them out free to our clients. This should be done on a much bigger scale for anyone participating in the DIB so that people don't have to go out and figure out, well, what kind of monitoring tool do I need? What kind of whatever? It's too hard for us to go out and screen these tools. They should be pre-screened, and we should have the processes in place. Increase the role of the Cyber AV to include POAM and timeline monitoring and reporting. Why not? You already have this organization there, and they're already hooked in. They're already great people over there. We attend all their meetings. Wonderful people over there. They should need more support. Fund the role of the Cyber AV to include training and deployment of many more assessors utilize improved technologies to radically reduce assessment times. We're doing our part on that. We're working on an automated risk, a real automated, a good one with better assessment results for much less money. But we're just one little company. We need a lot more people like us doing this stuff. There's some things that DoD can do, but there's more ideas and suggestions. Establish mechanisms for reimbursing approved implementation cost. If they're approved, because these people, they don't have the money to do this stuff, frankly. They just don't have it. And they're not charging enough. So what's the mechanism? Put it into the contract cost, but put it in blocks where it's been approved. Something to help them so they've got the money to do the things that DoD's insisting that they do. Increased accessibility and clarity of resources. Enhanced training. I can come up with a bunch of sub-points under this stuff. Happy to do it. If anyone's out there and wants to know what are the sub-points, send me an email, please. I'll do streamline, simplify, assessment, compliance. Streamline, simplify. Streamline, have I said that often enough? Foster communication, collaboration, and partnerships. A lot more working together needs to go on with this. It's a national security issue. We've got to do it. Provide management and technical support. Yeah, need support. Someplace, real support to help these people do this stuff. Right now, they have to call us. We'll do what we can for our clients, but the nation needs much more. Embrace innovation and technology. Embrace innovation. Well, let's just see it. We'll be presenting our innovation to various DoD organizations soon, asking for some DoD grants for our stuff. Embrace us, please. Continuously monitor, adapt, and improve. Yeah, this goes on and on. This battle goes on and on as we protect a lot of things that can be done. A lot of things that can be done, and we need DoD to lead the charge. What happens if we don't do it? Your mic is turned off.
Thanks. These large DoD contractors sub out an amazing amount of stuff, and those sub out stuff and so on and so forth. So if it turns out that there's not enough contractors, subcontractors, and subcontractors to do the work, then DoD really has two options. One is become even more reliant on the primes, and they've been trying to avoid that because the primes charge them a lot of money to cover their overhead. So the two options are they can't let a contract, which obviously has a national security and readiness impact, or the primes have to spin up new capabilities that they formerly subbed out, and now those costs are now included in their base at their overhead rate. So their overhead rate is 200% of base cost, which is not an unusual number for a large prime. Then that's going to affect the price of the contract to the federal government. And so that's really the challenge here. We're going to have much less competition and much higher prices to the DoD, and the DoD is not going to have a lot of options in terms of where to go because these subs just aren't there. And ultimately, that's going to lead to less readiness if, for example, a prime says, yeah, we can do this thing that we used to sub out, but it's going to take us an extra year to actually go build the process to do that because we don't have any people who know how that process works. We don't have any facilities. We need to go buy new buildings. We need to go set up new machinery, buying machinery. The lead time on getting the machinery is, months and months. So yeah, we can do that, but the costs are going to be much higher, and the timeline is going to be drug out much further than it would be otherwise.
Thanks, Mitch. The way the whole thing is set up right now, it's just kind of structurally imbalanced. It seems like the primes, the biggest companies, they can roll these costs into their overhead structure and the way they do business. But the DIB, all the smaller people, we don't have that capability. And that's just it's an evolution. This emergency, this problem has been developing, and it's now time for the DoD to go, yeah, right. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Let's get this on.
Yeah, and you said the primes can roll that into their overhead costs. They can probably do that to an extent, and most of the primes have been working on this for a couple of years now, right? Since the first version of CMMC came out in 2020, the primes have the big primes, which is like 5 or 6 companies. They've been working on this. They've been working hard on asking their subs where they're at, and they haven't necessarily been giving the subs any money or any resources to go do that. But at least they've been talking to them and saying, hey, just beware, this is coming. But there's only so much that they can absorb in their existing overhead structure. So even for those guys, I think it's going to be hard just to bury all that cost in existing overhead structures. I think that there's still going to be a problem there. And remember, the primes have a problem with scale. In this particular case, scale works against you. If you're a large prime and you have 100,000 employees and you have 1,000 locations, and some of those locations maybe not even in the United States, what do you do if some of your expertise is sitting in some other country? Let's say it's sitting in the EU, and you need to be able to share with them, but they're not part of this. What the scope is for this contract. Does that mean you need to go off and spin up that capability in the States that you didn't have before, that you were assuming that you could do it in Europe or Asia or some other place? So I think even for the primes, it's a challenge.
So one thing that kind of surprises me about this whole thing, we do attend these various CMMC meetings, Cyber AB, and other meetings and whatnot related to DoD compliance, and listen to these other presentations and whatnot, is that, you've got a couple of dudes here in Colorado who you don't hear this conversation. The conversation we're having with you right now, that you're engaged in right now, this is not something you've heard before out here. This is different. And, it's like, well, isn't it time? Isn't it time? So what else might happen if the ship doesn't change course? Well, let's see. Increased cyber attacks and data breaches. Okay. Loss of intellectual property and competitive advantage for our country. Disruption to critical infrastructure and operations. Oh, fingers crossed on that. Reputational damage and loss of trust. Reputation with who? With our allies. How about that? Financial and operational disruptions. That's going on every day. We see it. Weakened national security and readiness. Sorry, that's already happened. Innovation stagnation. Can't afford that. Can't afford that. Talent acquisition and retention challenges. Yeah. Negative impact on morale and productivity. Loss of international standing and partnership. Big stakes in this game. We need, and everyone can accept the fact that we haven't gotten there yet, but we just have to have a good plan to get there. And we're on board, and we got good leadership. Then everybody goes, okay, no problem. We'll get it done. What are your, okay, let's bring it down to home. Let's bring it home.
Let's talk about one thing that you mentioned a minute ago.
Sure.
So I think one of the interesting challenges is going to be the process changes that organizations need to make in order to become compliant. Let's assume that you don't have a score of 110 right now. And let's just take something very, very simple that everybody has to do. You have to escort visitors, not sometimes, not much of the time, but all of the time. You need to have a visitor log process. Again, not sometimes, not just at your headquarters facility, but at all of your work locations. Very, very simple requirement, right? It does not require a large investment, but it does require that people change the way they're doing business. They're used to letting the delivery guy or the guy who fills the soda machine or break room vending machines, they just roam around the building. unattended. Why? Because it's more convenient. And that, those kind of processes now have to change. Now, maybe you go off and do, if the person who fills the vending machine in the break room is the same person who comes every week, you do a background check on them, you go off and do this and that, and now you can say, okay, they are approved to be in the building without an escort. But that doesn't happen today for the most. The large primes, yeah, they do that. They actually badge those guys. I've been there before. They actually badge those guys and train them and all that stuff. But does the average company do that? Absolutely not.
About a year ago, we wrote a position paper called the Global Cyber War and Societal Response. You can see it on our website under all of our white papers and position papers and whatnot. Well, the whole thing was, are we in a global cyber war or not? Everyone's telling us yes. I mean, everyone is from the top. Yes, we are. But are we acting like it? That's our deal. We're positioning this conversation in the context of we're in a global cyber war. Let's ramp up. Let's deal with it. Okay, it's not kinetic yet, but a lot's going on. If you lose your money, it feels kinetic, pretty bad. And so, but we're saying that the response is not proportional to the threat.
You're saying that it's not kinetic yet, but there was a small cyber incident a year ago or so called Colonial Pipeline, and people on the East Coast People on the East Coast couldn't get gas for their cars, or delivery vehicles couldn't get diesel for their trucks. That became really freaking kinetic very quickly.
Yeah, someone was testing out whether they could pull that off or not. Interesting. Now let's get over to your compliance. How do they know my clause and timeline? Well, we've got a pretty good idea. Okay, so the costs are going to vary for everybody, right? Mileage varies, right, for everybody. You're a small company or other than small. What's the complexity of your IT environment? How much CUI do you have? Whether or not, do you have an enclave? Is that what's best for you or not? How many and what kind of third-party tools? What's that? Whether you need to migrate from, whether do you have to migrate from one environment to another? Okay. We don't know what your costs are. Neither do you, frankly. We know you don't know because we deal with you people coming all the time. We have to help you. And it's so we understand. I mean, you're not, that's just the way it is right now. Everybody's in the same boat. Okay.
Let me spend a minute talking about number 3. So one of the things that the government has said very blatantly, clearly, is they want to reduce the amount of CUI that is being shared around the defense industrial base. I think personally that is the right answer. To the degree that you have a subcontractor that you do not have to share CUI with, that contractor does not have to be compliant because they don't represent a risk, right? So to the degree that you can do that, the other thing related to that is when you get a contract and you see the 7012 clause in the contract and it says, you got to protect CUI, before the contract is awarded, for example, in the bidders conference where all the bidders for the contract are there, say, please provide a list of each and every item which is CUI on this contract so that we can properly address the costs. And when some of our customers have done that, because we absolutely advise customers to do this in the most public way possible, because it kind of forces the issue, you get, at least some of our customers report, you get a deer in the headlights kind of look on the part of the person that is slowing down that 7012 clause, right? Because the requirement of 7012 is if your prime contractor or whoever is your upstream has 7012 in their contract, they have to flow it down to you. So the clause can still be in there. That's not a problem. But what you need to know, because the clause says, if you have access to CUI, you got to protect it. But what you need to know before you estimate the cost of the contract, and this is what people should have been doing in 2017 and haven't, you need to know what CUI you have and figure out whether you really need it and go back to that up-level vendor and say, nope, don't want that, don't need it, you keep it. If we did that, A, we'd be a whole lot more secure, and B, you'd be in a much better position to be able to estimate what your true costs are.
And whatever your costs are, when you start, now you're spending an hour being trained on this right now. You've not had this conversation with anybody else prior to today. So you're learning something today for sure. How much are you being paid within your company? What's your hourly rate in there? That time, that's training. You're being trained on this subject matter. That goes into, that assessment line item, preparation and whatnot for those assessments. You're preparing to get a set. You're preparing for this thing. All these costs need to be documented. Document them. That's your only hope of getting your money out of DOD, is if you've got good documented costs. Now, will they step up in some way or another and help? Well, they will, but they're not going to say, well, how much did it cost? And you just give them an estimate. So the better that you document it right now and present it in a coherent manner to them, going to increase get your money back on that. So you got to be thinking like this at a business, and a business going on war footing. And if you're watching this, most likely you're working for DOD or thinking about working for DOD, but the entire federal government is coming right behind it. The entire federal government. And then what's going to happen? State contracts. They have the same issues. Okay, maybe not with CUI, but sensitive information. They're going to be copying aspects of this approach to protecting people's contractors' IT infrastructure. So if you're doing contracts, if you're performing contract work for the federal government, state governments, whatever governments, okay, you've got to up your game. What you've been doing in the past is not going to work. Are you ready? Right now you're not. But,
well, and if that's, it's not just governments, state, federal, local, tribal governments. It's large Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies that are also saying the same thing. We, our clients deal with large entities, publicly traded entities, and those publicly traded entities are coming down to them, our customers, and saying, tell me about your security plan. And even though they don't, we had a situation where we had a client of ours was bidding on a contract for a local community hospital here in Colorado. And the hospital asked them, well, show us your 800-171 compliance status. And at that time, this was a couple of years ago, they couldn't do that. And the hospital said, thank you, we'll find another vendor. So it is not just the government. What I think is going to happen, and it makes a lot of sense to me, is that we're going to see private industry say, well, crap, we've already got 1 million companies that are working hard on getting certified on 800-171 and CMMC. Well, let's just jump on that bandwagon. Why reinvent the wheel?
Exactly. Why reinvent the wheel? Let's talk about the timeline. How long does it take? How long does this thing take? Again, it depends on these various things in here. How long it takes. But with that in mind, small companies with low security maturity got to figure 3 to 6 months. Medium companies, 6 to 12. Large companies, 12 to 18. These are general. This is just what we're seeing. And this assumes that you get it together and you start devoting resources and time to it every week. You're working on it. It's part of what you do. Why is it part of what you do? Because you don't want to lose those contracts, or you want to get into this massive feeding pool where these new contracts, where we're moving in the future. And now we're moving into the prize is yours. Because you've seen the numbers, you've seen where things are right now, you see the change that the federal government is bound and determined to force and feel like it must force for the protection of the nation. And so now, and we've showed you these numbers here of the difference between what the government is saying is out there in the contractor base, DOD, and what's really there is what we're saying. It's a huge opportunity. I forget how many MSPs are in the country. It's like 90,000. We can't find MSPs who not only they're not certified. Yeah, there are a few of them that are certified, just very few. They're very expensive for this, but or can be certified, not completely certified, but they've done it. We can't find MSPs who are working on becoming certified. That's our job with them. We help them get on track, but there's a massive opportunity for MSPs if they can get their minds wrapped around this and commit to it. It's hard. It's hard. How does DOD encourage these MSPs to say, okay, if you do it the right way, we will support you, get reimbursed for costs, we'll do this, we'll do that, whatever, because they know that the country needs a strong, well-organized MSP base out there serving the DIB. I mean, big opportunity. You can get your mind wrapped around it and ready to go and ready to face the inevitable, because this thing is so big that it's going to ratchet through. Well, we haven't even mentioned cybersecurity insurance companies. Once you become compliant with 800-171, well, you're compliant with the rest. Your insurance companies, large commercial customers, anyone, you can prove you're compliant because it's all the same blocking and tackling. It's all the same stuff that you have to do to protect your IT infrastructure. That's the deal. You're protecting your IT infrastructure. Now, how does that meet compliance? Meets it completely if you do it right.
Now, if you're a vendor, you're an external service provider or some other person in the commerce ecosystem, the opportunity for you is, let's assume that you have those 220,000 people and that's all you have. There's a lot of vendors they're going to go to that they currently use, and they're going to say, tell me about your CMMC compliance status, and they're going to get the deer in the headlights look, and they're going to say to their procurement folks, gee, tell me about other options we have, because I don't think these guys are going to get their act together. If you are in a position to go off and say, we do have our act together, we are ready, and we can do that today, even if you are more expensive than the company that isn't ready, and you will be more expensive because it is going to cost you more. That's just the reality of it, whether you're a tool vendor or whether you're a service provider. But now all of a sudden you are in a position to be able to say, yeah, we can go off and work with you today, and we can cut down your agita on worrying about whether you're going to be able to be certified, because we are already ahead of that game. The folks that are incumbent and are not thinking about this, and that's most of them, they're going to have to get kicked to the curb, because the folks that are trying to get certified will have no choice.
But if you're an ESP, now you're not ready now, that's for sure. But let's say you commit. Management says, we commit. We're going to do it. We're going to make it happen. We're going to do it right. And give us a call. We can help you do that. But anyway, now when you go in with a new client or someone, you can't say we've done it, but you say we have committed, we're doing it, and you lead with that conversation. We're on it. We understand the requirements. We've gotten the help. We're working on it and we're going to be in the very first tranche of ESPs in our product category that are going to be compliant, and we're on it. That's a strong point to make when you're dealing with your clients who are dealing with compliance as well. That's where you want to be right now. And the sooner you can be in there and say, yeah, we've been on it for 3 months, 4 months. See, we're halfway through. We're more than halfway through. We're steadily working on it, and we're committing, and we can prove, because compliance means nothing if it's not documented. If it's not documented, it isn't done, okay? When you're working with us and our system, and we have an organized system for becoming compliant, documentation. You're documented, baby. It's there. It's there. You can prove it. You can prove it. That's it. That's what wins the game. It's an opportunity, and your opportunities multiply as they're seized. That's the truth.
And remember, there's a limited number of C3PAOs for CMMC or 3PAOs for FedRAMP. Those folks are going to get very, very busy. They're already saying that there's a 6 month waiting period. If you were to go to, assuming that you are ready today, and they agreed that you are ready, for a lot of these folks, there's a 6 month waiting period to get on the list to go through the certification process, because they just don't have enough people to go do that. There's not enough people who are certified to do that. So the longer you wait, the longer it's going to be before you can even get into the queue in order to be certified.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Now, here's us again. Use us. Give us a call. Here's some more information about who we are again right here. And you can partner with us as well. You can use us to be your consultant to make it happen out there, but you can partner with us. If you're an MSP, you're a CISO, you want to be an affiliate partner, you have your own client base, you want us to get you up to speed. Let's say you're a cybersecurity consultant, but you want to get into the space and you want us to help you get you there and become an affiliate partner with us. We can work together. We can back you up. We have the resources to do it. You can be, if you're really good at what you know, you can be on our expert witness team as well. Mitch leads that team. I'm going to use the basis of the information in this presentation to consolidate it down into a public response, a loving, supportive, collaborative public response with Department of Defense, telling them this is how we see it and this is what we think you guys should be thinking about. Here's how we think you ought to approach this thing. But it needs more. We're two pukes in Colorado. We need other people out there making this case, and being part of it and saying this, because this is our reality. Now, if we're not seeing reality correctly, someone show us, give us your report and see what you think about that. Hey, thanks for hanging in. Mitch, why don't you close it out?
This is clearly a large problem. It's not an easy problem to solve. On the other hand, as we see from the folks that get hit by cyber attacks, which is the whole motivation here, where they either lose access to their systems, they lose their intellectual property. And boy, I mean, we have story after story after story of folks that get into that problem. It costs you a bucket of money. It affects your business. It gets you sued. It distracts your executive team. And that's the whole idea behind 800-171 CMMC, is to make you more secure so that the odds of that happening to you are less. So, if you think you can do that by yourself, that's great. We support you in doing that. If you think you need help doing that, and we think virtually everybody does need help doing that, then please reach out to us. Stay in touch. We continue to publish stuff on a variety of forums, on our website, on YouTube, and on just a whole bunch of different platforms. We have a weekly blog and newsletter we publish. So lots of information that's available if you choose to do that. And we'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Mitch, and thanks to all of y'all. And yes, all of y'all, you eagle-eyed viewers out there, yeah, these pictures of Mitch and me when we were younger, but just think, we're a lot smarter now. And we just shared that with you right now. And thanks. And we'll see you on the fronts.
Thank you for watching. For more information or to purchase this or any other of our board or executive services, visit us at cybersecurity.com. Call us at 303-887-5864 or email us at rh@cybersecurity.com. Goodbye.